An examination of the recent political history of Africa reveals that democracy has made great progress on our African continent. The increased number of competitive multi-party elections is one of the triumphs of the democratic trajectory of Africa. The democratic space is broadening year after year. With the rise of popular multi-party democracy in the 1990s, the holding of regular elections has become the norm rather than the exception. Broad-based electoral democracies have supplanted the authoritarian and military regimes of previous decades. And this is a great achievement for the African continent. In many instances, these democracies have witnessed the peaceful transfer of power from ruling parties to the opposition. Electoral democracies have contributed much to the stabilization of the continent and the subsequent advances in the dividend that flows from democratic processes. And the most important dividend that flows from democratic elections and the democratic process is economic growth, as well as social development. However, deficiencies in the quality of some electoral democracies have raised concern about the potential for reversal. The opening of political environment requires impartial, professional, and technically sound arbitration of election competition. Electoral management bodies have delivered credible elections on our continent, including here in South Africa. Yet many countries still fall short in the administration of elections. The lack of credible electoral processes and disputed results are not the only threat to the consolidation of democracy. Democracy cannot flourish where some people, particularly the poor, do not have access to the judicial system, do not benefit from the rule of law, and are unable to exercise their own basic human rights. Democracy cannot flourish when those with resources are able to make representations to lawmakers, but those who do not have resources are not capable of doing so. There is therefore a need for greater transparency in the funding of political parties, alongside the establishment of public funding mechanisms through which political parties can be sustained. Democracy cannot flourish when the media is also not free, when it does not reflect the diversity of views as well the interests of the people of a country. There is good reason to be concerned not only with measures the government might use to curb media freedom, but also with the unintended bias that the media's commercial considerations often produce. As our democracies develop right across the continent, we need to pay particular attention to the management of disaffection and dissent. The right to peaceful protest, to freedom of association, to freedom of expression are fundamental pillars of any democratic society. Yet many countries, South Africa, my own country included, often struggle to manage the tension between the militant exercise of these rights and the maintenance of the rule of law and the protection of life and property. Democracy thrives when there is space for dissent. When people express their differences, that is when democracy thrives. It is almost like the oxygen that democracy needs, because through that, public representatives are able to listen to the dissent of the people and change policy and change the direction in which things may be going. But the manner in which that dissent is expressed should not undermine the very principle on which the democratic order is built. In recent weeks, South Africa has witnessed widespread student protest over the cost of higher education. While seeking to address their own immediate material concerns, they have sharply raised an issue that is critical to the future of our country. They have been exercising their right to protest. They have been demanding their right to education. They have done much to prove the vibrancy and the strength of our democracy. And yet there are some within the ranks of the students, probably a minority, who have engaged in violence and the destruction of property. And this act on its own, violence and destruction of property, goes against the democratic principles of accepting dissent. Dissent, yes, it is the oxygen that democracy needs, but it needs to be exercised in a way where we do not undermine our own democratic principles. The manner in which a society resolves its conflicts, how it manages the tensions in society, how it navigates the line between dissent and disorder, says much about the depth and the resilience of the democracy in a country. In this instance, on the challenges we are facing at our universities, I'm certain that an acceptable, sustainable solution will be found that in the process, South Africa's democratic values and practices will forever be enhanced.